This is the Athletes as Educators podcast. I'm your host, Angie Lewis. On this podcast, I interview current and former elite athletes who are doing extraordinary things outside of sports. You can listen to a new podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Be sure to leave a review. Now it's game time. On the podcast today, we have Travis Key. He played football at Michigan State University, played professional football, and now is a packaging engineer. Travis, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Angie. I'm excited about this platform.
Travis, we met, I think it was 3 years ago at 4th and 1. Now, everyone knows I'm a basketball player, but really good friend who played college ball, is from Lansing, Michigan. You guys ran this camp called 4th and 1. Will you tell us about 4th and 1, which is now Apex Academy?
I sure will. Yep. So 4th and 1, which we just transitioned to Apex Academy. A little bit difference in the program and how we deliver the platform. But back 4th and 1, when we were first introduced, is basically a camp that's geared to help high school football players in particular bridge the gap in between the skills that they acquire on the field in other areas of their lives to achieve success, right? So we focus on a lot of personal development stuff, leadership, handling adversity, just a lot of character development activity there. We also focus on access to education, which, the ACT, the SAT exam and things like that serve as the entrance exam or the gateway to being able to go to college, right? So we put a lot of emphasis on providing resources to help prepare them for that situation as well.
So I get to 4th and 1 and realized that there is nothing else like this that I've ever experienced in terms of a camp, and was totally blown away. Like, why did you guys even start it? I mean, you're a packaging engineer. Caleb is the director of player development for the Miami Dolphins. Everyone on your team who put this together, pretty successful in doing big things themselves. Why come back and do this?
Yeah, so the big component is, all of us have something in common, or the majority of us have something in common. And, that's the fact that we played an organized sport. And most of us played it at a really high level. And we all, understand the strong characteristics and how important it is, to be able to utilize those characteristics and transition over into, other areas of your life to be successful. Then all of our connections with, just youth in general, our passions around developing our youth, connections in Lansing and other under-resourced, low income, at risk, however you want to term it, communities. There's definitely a need, and we all see that need, and we're all passionate about making an impact there. So it only made sense. Caleb and I sat down back in 2010, and, at that time I was just hanging up the cleats, stepping away from the game. Caleb was really just vaulting into his career as a, front office professional in the NFL. And, we started the conversation around all of the lessons that we've learned through the game. And eventually that led to, the gap that exists between the understanding that high school student athletes have today in regards to what it takes to get to that level. And we just felt obligated at that point, to start putting rubber to the pavement and make something happen. Long story short, Darren Roberts was a defensive backs coach with the Detroit Lions at the time when Caleb was doing his internship there. He served as sort of a mentor for us through the process. We told him about our vision, and come to find out he had just started a program called 4th and 1 in East Texas the year prior. And so, as he was mentoring us through the process, all of the legal stuff that we had to, look forward to and whatnot, we basically came to terms that, the folks that we wanted to serve, the demographics of those individuals were the same. Our mission was pretty well aligned. It wasn't exact, but pretty well aligned. And Caleb and I wanted to act faster really, if we'd had to go through the normal process, then what we'd have been able to do. So we decided to just come underneath the umbrella of Fourth and One, the organization that Darren already established, and just move a camp, so erect a camp in Lansing and serve that community there. So we did that for 4 strong years. Had a great time, great relationship with that organization. Learned a lot. Then just this past year, Caleb and I were, we were blessed and in a position to be able to branch off and start Apex Academy, which is our full vision, right? With all of the bells and whistles, everything that we envisioned day one, but we're now in a position to be able to execute it. So Fourth and One, the major difference is just the way that we execute and interact with our kids. We have a cohort model, so we bring kids in our program as rising sophomores, and they stay in our program for 3 years, going into college and beyond, right? And so there's a different curriculum from a development perspective, personally, from a development perspective, academically, that they'll go through each year, right? So it's progressive. And, the main focus is just to get these kids to understand what it takes to get to college in general, not as a student athlete per se,
right,
but to help them understand, the access to the game that they have now and the lessons that they're going to learn now. How can they use those lessons to just get to college and be successful in college, whether they can play a sport or not?
Exactly. Because we know that most student athletes aren't going to play college sports.
Right.
And so you guys approach it in a holistic development way.
Exactly.
Travis, you know what's going to happen. People are going to listen to this podcast and listen to the first 5 minutes and think that you had it easy. You played at Michigan State. You're a packaging engineer for a really big company. Did you have any challenges along the way? And if so, what are some of those?
My life has been full of challenges.
Okay.
But you know what? I've always been a proponent of, not letting my circumstances, right, dictate where I'm going to end up, right? One thing I always say, and a message that I try to deliver when I'm speaking to kids and things like that is, to not let statistics around the color of your skin, around your gender, around the zip code that you grow up in, dictate where you're going to end up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for myself in particular, I was born in Harvey, Illinois, which is on the south side of Chicago.
Okay.
Very, very rough situation, right? A lot of statistics come to mind there. By, growing up just in that zip code, most would say by the age of 30, which I just turned 30, December 31st. So I'm an old man now, but most would say...
30's not old. Time out. 30's not old, man. Life just gets better.
It's getting better, man. But most would say, by the age of 30, coming from where I came from, I either be, on drugs, in jail or dead, and I chose at a really early age to not let that happen to me. And, my mindset has always been focused on doing whatever it took to make sure that I ended up in a better situation and that my kids and future generations under me didn't have to grow up the way or around and in the circumstances that I had to grow up in, right? Mm-hmm. So that's always been my focus. Going into high school, my mom made a courageous decision to move us out of the city, moved us up here to Three Rivers, Michigan. So total opposite end of the spectrum in terms of, demographics and things like that. Primarily, Caucasian community, rural area. Mm-hmm. I had to walk down a dirt road to get to the bus stop, right? So
literally,
you
literally walked down a dirt road.
Had to walk down a dirt road to get to my bus stop.
Okay.
So complete culture shock, right? But she made that decision, in order to give me and my brother, who's a little bit older than I am, a year older than I am, to give us a better chance. Mm-hmm. And when we moved, we didn't want to move, being young teenagers. But she sat us down and she told us that it was a chance for a new opportunity. It was a chance for us to kind of recreate, who we were perceived to be, and just to put us on a better trajectory, right? And so I took that to heart, and really just focused on surrounding myself with the right people. Focused on on my academics, and of course I love sports, football, right, basketball, track. Were my 3 main sports. And then, I just had a chip on my shoulder, I guess you can say, that really drove me to just work hard and compete,
Mm-hmm.
to my fullest, and just not let anyone outwork me in anything. Right.
How many college scholarship offers did you get when you were a senior?
I had some opportunities to come and play football at the Division 3 level, which there are no scholarships there. Had some Division 2 interests,
How
but
many
never really
people, Travis, how many people said we are offering you a full athletic scholarship?
zero,
Zero. So
zero.
students need to hear that though. They need to hear that.
Yeah,
So you made the choice to go to Michigan State because of their engineering program.
exactly,
So you were
exactly. So
focused on academics.
no question about it. I took a look at their program, made a couple of visits up here to campus, and really fell in love with the place. I
Hmm.
was already in love with it from a distance, but didn't have any connection. Right, came up here, saw what the opportunity was, and decided to ball all of those other inquiries and interests up and throw it in the trash and go to Michigan State and focus on my education. And my mindset was I'll walk onto the team because I've always had confidence in my ability to play.
Hmm.
But I knew at the end of the day if I didn't make it, I'd be all right.
I think it's important that athletes out there who are listening, parents who are out there who are listening, know that focus on academics. Like if your son or daughter has an interest in something, have that be the driving force for their selection, because then you're empowered to make your college decision and you're not at the whim of college coaches and those few options that you may have if you only focus on athletics. So
Exactly.
Travis, you walked on to the football team at Michigan State. Some would say you're a little crazy. Like you have to be just a little crazy to attempt that. Will you tell us about your decision to walk on and the process
Yeah.
of walking on?
Oh yeah. A lot of folks thought I was crazy. One, I played defensive back, 5'10" at best. Right. That's on my good day. Stretched out. Um, at the time coming out of high school, I was 167 pounds or something like that, right? So not your prototypical Division 1 defensive back, right? But I knew that I had the mindset, and I knew I wasn't gonna let anyone outwork me if I got the opportunity, right? A lot of folks called me crazy, but I
Hmm.
decided to walk on and give it a shot. When I actually showed up to campus, this is how naive I was, right? So I was accepted into the school, into Michigan State. Showed up to campus, hadn't communicated with any coaches at all prior to, um, and just being as naive as I was about the process, I thought I was just going to be able to walk into the football building,
Hmm.
go meet with the coach, tell him I want to play, and get my opportunity. Um, so first day on campus, that's what I set out to do, and I was quickly brought to the reality that it doesn't happen like that. I had already missed, the tryout, the open tryout for that, fall season. So I got the news that I would have to wait until January just to even try out, to even try out for the team. Um, so I spent, it was a blessing in disguise, no doubt.
Yeah.
I spent the whole, my whole first semester getting acclimated to school,
Hmm.
getting acclimated with the social life and things like that, all the responsibilities that come along with being a college student. Um, and it was just a great thing for me. But I never lost sight of what I wanted to do, right, athletically. So every day, I was working out, lifting weights, running at the intramural facility. I would have folks in my dorm, throwing passes to me and punting the
Hmm.
ball. I'm out in the fields catching punts and things like that, just, preparing for what I wanted to do. And a lot of folks that I hung out with thought that I was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but, I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew the type of work that it was going to take to even give myself a chance.
So, let's get this straight. You walk on to college as a freshman. You walk on
Mm-hmm.
campus as a freshman. You go to the coach's office and say, "Hey,
Yep.
I want to try out for the team." And they're
Yep.
like, "No, no, no, no. You can't try out. You've completely
Doesn't work
missed
like
it."
that.
No, it doesn't work. So, athletes, if you are out there, you need to make contact with coaches or someone in the department before the first day of class for any sport. Like, if you wait
Right.
to get on campus, it is probably a little too late. to make that happen. And then you're working out just for a chance to try out.
Yep.
For a season that's a year. So you wouldn't be able to play literally for an entire year.
Exactly.
And you were working out like you had a game the next day.
Exactly. I knew I had to approach it that way, and it really paid off because that January when we came back from Christmas break, I got the email saying that, the tryout was such and such date, such and such time. I showed up, man, and there were probably, I don't know, 70, 80 folks in the indoor facility with aspirations that were very similar to mine, right? A lot. Funny thing is, a lot of the folks that were in there were the same folks that were working out, across from me at the IM, and I would tell them what I wanted to do, and they look at me like I was crazy. But went in, and I just took the same approach in there that I had this entire time. I wasn't gonna let anyone outwork me, regardless of if I was the fastest guy, the biggest guy, the strongest guy. I wasn't gonna let anyone give more effort than me on that day, right? So I made a conscious effort, which I think this is probably the one thing that really gave me a chance right here. And this is a lesson to anyone who's out there listening. I made a very conscious effort to be the first person in line in every single drill that we did that day, right? Now, I put my body through a lot of torture and pain doing that because I had to go out and demonstrate all of the drills before we actually engaged in the drill. And then I had to go right back in line and go full speed again and complete that drill, right? But I knew that, just doing that, just that gesture alone would allow me to show the coaches something that they couldn't measure on a stopwatch or on a bench or, with the tape measure at the vertical jump, right? I was showing them that I had, initiative. I was showing them that I had some leadership ability, things like that, right? Exactly. And so I think, honest to God, I think that is probably the one thing that I did that day that allowed me to be the only one person out of all of those folks that showed up to get an invitation back to come and continue my dream.
That's pretty fascinating. And it's important that athletes know that it's not always stats. Stats aren't the only thing that coaches look for. They look for those intangibles that you will never see on a stat sheet. Your willingness to step up and be a leader, right? They saw that in you. And that's tremendous that you can pinpoint that moment and that conscious decision to do something that would give you an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Travis, so you get an opportunity to play on the team. So you played, you started and then you played every game, all game, right? Because that's what they're going to think. They're going to hear you play.
I know.
And there's going to be this assumption that you played every game. You went through all of this, and what happened the upcoming season?
Man, so, my freshman year, which was actually my sophomore year in school, right? So my freshman year playing, coming in as a walk-on, you got to understand that you're not going to be treated, like the scholarship athletes. You're not going to have, the same perks. The coaches aren't going to feel the same about you. You're going to have to literally earn every bit of respect that you get from the players and the coaches. So coming in, I had to do a lot of the dirty work in practice and stuff like that, right? I had to, all of the scout team stuff, holding the bags, holding the dummies, and, just all of the grunt work. But the one thing that I always took pride in, right, was that I was there. In that moment, I was there to do a specific job, and I was there for a reason, right? And in that moment, my job was to make my teammates better, right? That was my job, and I took that job very seriously. And so, everybody, all of my teammates and my coaches, every time someone had to line up against me and I was a scout team guy, right, just giving a quote-unquote look,
right.
Everyone knew that they were going to have to come with everything they had. They were going to have to bring their A game, right? I wasn't going to take it easy. I wasn't just going to, follow a card and go run to a spot and just let someone, dominate or make a play on me. I never had that mindset because, of course, I had a lot of pride too, right? I knew I had a job, but I had a lot of pride. And so, eventually just that mindset alone, it began to separate me from all of the other walk-ons that were there, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I began to gain some respect from my coaches and my teammates as a player, right? So they began to see some of the ability that I had just from approaching practice that way, right? And I was making my teammates better, so I was getting my job done. So I got some respect from that angle as well. But first year I just played, just from that alone, my reward from working hard like that was just to get a spot on special teams,
Yeah.
right? So I was a special teams guy. I played special teams my first year, my second year. Then I got the opportunity to start about halfway through my junior year. Um, and at that moment, I had already been in the system for so long. I'm a smart guy. I understood the playbook. I knew exactly where I needed to be, where everyone else needed to be, things like that. And so all I needed was the opportunity to get on the field. And once that opportunity came, there was no way I was going to let someone either outwork me or outsmart me and take it away. So
you got the
started,
opportunity.
yeah. So started my junior year, or halfway, half of my junior year, and then I started, my senior year. Earned a scholarship a long time ago. I forgot that part. So after my first year of just grinding it out, right? My coaches blessed me with a scholarship, and they said they recognized what I brought to the table and what I could do for the team, so on and so forth. So they rewarded me a scholarship after my first year being on the team. But one of the most proud moments in my life, outside of the birth of my children,
Mm-hmm.
I would say is on August 22nd, 2007. I remember it like it was yesterday. Wrapping up fall camp, and um, my teammates and coaches honored me as a captain of the team. As a senior captain of the team, and like the hair on my arm stand up every time I think about it. But that moment alone was just it just solidified all of my hard work, all of my effort, and it helped me understand that you can control what you do and where you end up, and influencing people and focusing on influencing people and making an impact on others around you through your work and through your energy and through your effort. Um, that's what's most
Yeah.
important. So
It sounds like you bring that championship mindset to that you brought that mindset to your work, and it started with you first being the one going out there and pushing yourself beyond what you thought was possible, and
yep,
hurting and playing through pain and all of the uncomfortable times led
exactly,
to you ultimately being a leader on the team.
exactly,
And so I love your story, because your experience, because people think that you start out as the best player, then everyone sees you as a leader. And that's not
right,
the case. Like, you were a servant first, and you
no doubt about
pushed
it.
people, and the team was always your highest priority. It wasn't about self.
Yep, yeah, and then just that whole notion around hard work, right?
Mm-hmm.
People think if I work hard, I'll get what I deserve or what I want. There's a couple of things to it, right? One, you got to understand you can work extremely hard, right? You can outwork everybody in the building. Um, but if you don't get the opportunity, right, then you may not achieve your goal. But how do you get the opportunity? You get the opportunity based on how you treat people, how you interact with people, the type of relationships that you build with the folks that have the access to give you an opportunity, right? So that's where a lot of folks kind of miss a beat. It's not just working hard, right? It's about the relationships that you build with the folks that have access to things that you want, right?
That's deep.
And
That's
then two on the hard work piece, it's like you can't. It's not something that you can just turn off and turn on. And when I know I got to go to practice, I'm just gonna turn this on. I'm gonna flip the switch and I'm gonna go. It has to be constant. Like if you have it in you, you're gonna work hard at every single thing that's put in front of you, every challenge that's presented to you in your life, no matter if it's athletically, academically, socially, mentally, whatever it is, relationship wise.
yep.
Every challenge, everything that comes in front of you, you're gonna work hard to to be the best and overcome it, if that's the case, right? And
Exactly.
so in the moments where things get really tough on us mentally, physically, if we don't always have that switch on, if it's not a constant, that's when it'll be easy to revert back to autopilot and try to coast. And then when we do that, we fail, right? So you can't make yourself vulnerable. It has to be something that you do all the time.
Exactly. No, you make a really great point about that. I want to know how you use that mindset in your current work. Because you're an engineer, and
Yeah.
what we know is you don't wake up, decide to be an engineer, and then go apply for a job. You have to do an internship. You have to learn about the industry. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah. So you bring a good point up about the internship piece, right? So in my profession, you really need an internship before gonna jump into a full time position. Um, and being a student athlete in college challenges that tremendously, right? Just with the time and the demands and things like that that a student athlete has. I couldn't just leave campus and go to California for 6 months and do an internship because I had responsibilities to the university. Um, so I had to make some sacrifices. During um, the spring and summer workouts, I had a different schedule than everyone else that was on the team. I would have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get my workout out of the way, then hop on the highway, drive an hour to Flint, Michigan, and then work for 7 hours, then hop in my van, drive back, to campus, and then do all of the afternoon workouts with my teammates. So the 7-on-7s, the conditioning, and all of that stuff. So I did that for part of spring and an entire summer, right, where everyone else was just kind of taking a couple classes, go to a couple workouts, and then they're relaxing for the rest of the day. So I had to make a lot of sacrifices, but I knew it was what I had to do in order to achieve in this profession. And so that's where it started. But on the day to day, man, I still have that mindset, right? I know that I can't just do what everyone else is doing, right? If I want to be great, if I want to be the best packaging engineer in my company, if I want to be the best packaging engineer in the industry, period, right? I can't just go through the motions. I can't just do what everyone else is doing. I can't measure myself per se against everyone else. I have to set my own bar and measure myself against that bar. And so it's just the mindset that I have, man.
TK, before I met you, I had no idea about packaging engineering, right? And I'll never forget, it was one day at camp, we were having lunch, and I was like, so what do you do? And
Right.
what is packaging engineering? How did you get involved or interested in the engineering profession, and why packaging engineering opposed to mechanical, electrical, all of the other segments of engineering?
Yeah, so I started out as a mechanical engineer major at Michigan State.
Okay.
Um, no one it's crazy. No one knows what a packaging engineer
No.
is, including me. I didn't know what it was until I got to Michigan State and I was exposed to it. But the thing about packaging that really drew me in, there's a strong business component to it. So the people, the relationships component piece that I told I'm naturally drawn to that atmosphere. Those are some of my natural strengths. But I'm also I have an innovative spirit.
Okay.
I'm a very technical person in terms of my mind, but my delivery and like my interaction is all about people, right? So packaging allowed that sort of scenario for me. It was really a good fit. Um, and so once I was exposed to it and I understood everything that it had to offer, I jumped right in. But just to clear it up, what packaging engineering is, right? So if you at its very core, every consumer product comes in a package,
Will
right?
you give us an example?
No matter if it's Pepsi, the liquid in the bottle, right? No
Okay.
matter if it's Frosted Flakes in the box, right? No matter if it's the steering wheel that goes on an Escalade that has to be shipped to GM before it's installed, right? Everything comes in a package, right? If it has to be shipped to a consumer or a customer, it has to be in a package. And so basically, my team or my profession, we're the science and the engineering behind those packages, right? So you can use your imagination and understand how it varies across different industries.
Will you give us an example of a project that you had, if you can?
Uh, yeah. I mean, it's right now. A lot of the stuff that I work on right now is so I'm on our salty snacks team,
Okay.
right? And so I support all of our salty snacks. So we have like some Keebler salty snacks, so like Club Crackers. We own Cheez It. We own Pringles, the Pringles brand, things like that. So I do a lot of work around optimizing our packaging. So a lot of stuff that you wouldn't be able to see per se, but there's a lot of engineering and science that goes into the package to preserve the product and withstand through our distribution channels and things like that. Um, the cool innovative projects that I'm working on, of course, I can't talk about them right now on this call. But I do get to work on some fun stuff as well, just designing new packaging concepts to go into new channels and things like that.
So what I love about your perspective and your journey, TK, is that you were an athlete, like serious committed athlete, but you also
Mhm.
knew that you needed a career and you leveraged your strengths and understood that you needed to make a decision about your major, that you could build a career and there was a career trajectory. I think a lot of times athletes are so focused on sport that we, especially football, basketball, like those really, the sports that get a lot of revenue, right? And a lot of publicity. We're so fixated on being professional athletes that we miss this opportunity. And so I
Right.
like to deep dive on athletes and in careers so that younger athletes who are listening, or even those who are in college who are listening, can hear and be exposed to different industries.
Hmm.
Let's shift for a moment here.
Okay.
I haven't mentioned yet that you're an author, Beyond the Gridiron. You
Yeah.
co-authored a book with a really good friend, Ashton Henderson. You're a really good friend. Like
Yes.
I just met him through you. So will you talk a little bit about Beyond the Gridiron and
Yeah.
how the book came about?
No doubt. So, Ashton was on our original team with Fourth and One when we started when we pulled that nonprofit organization up to Lansing. One of my former teammates, one of my very very best friends to this day. Um, but actually, Ashton, Caleb, and we were talking one of our late night chats at camp. We were just talking about just the gap that exists and how sort of naive the kids that we were dealing with at our camp and that were in our program, how naive they were about the process and
Mm-hmm.
how naive they were about their skill level, how naive they were about the skill level that it was going to take to be able to go to college and play and be successful and get to the NFL and all that good stuff, right? And so we just started talking about, just brainstorming around stuff that we could do to make a broader impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just for, under-resourced, underserved high school student athletes, but just high school student athletes in general, male and female. Um, to make a long story short, we decided that we needed to write a book, just based on, the three of us, the experiences that we've had, being players, being teammates, being
Mm-hmm.
coaches, front office professionals, things like that. We understood that we had a lot of the knowledge and a lot of the experience, right?
Definitely.
And we played at Michigan State University. Ashton at the time he was, at Florida State, which he's back at Florida State right now. And, he's the director of associate director of academics down there. Caleb's in the front office in the NFL. So we came with some with some backing, with some substance behind our thoughts and experiences. But we just decided that we needed to write a book. Caleb was twiddling his thumbs and didn't want to get on board at first. And so Ashton kept poking me, and we just put pen to paper, and probably 8-9 months after we started, we had a product. We had a product, and then we figured out a way to get Caleb back intertwined. He has a piece in the book, but
Yeah.
Ashton and I did all of the dirty work.
It is a really good book, though. I've read it, was able to get some exclusive before it was released.
Yeah.
Readings of it, and it is a really good book. Parents, if you're out there, you have athletes who are interested in playing college sports or college athletes, you need to read Beyond the Gridiron, because Travis, Caleb and Ashton's experiences are going to resonate with you, and they offer some really practical advice on ways to maximize your athletic experience, but also prepare for life.
Exactly. And we put a strong emphasis on, not throwing a bunch of stats at kids and parents, not, giving them 300-400 pages of material to read, stuff that they hear on a regular basis. We tried to, portray all of those stats and all of those things that I just spoke about through our experiences, right? And let them just come to light through the journey that the journeys that we've taken. But ultimately, the mission of the book is just to help student athletes be better prepared, before they come in. Definitely. So that can equal success on the way out, right? Use that athletic experience, if you're blessed enough to get it, to position yourself for long-term sustainable success, right? Leveraging all the resources that are available to you, all of the access that you have as a student athlete.
Exactly.
A lot of folks take that stuff for granted, but we want to make sure that we can, give folks a leg up and a heads up before they show up to campus.
Your book definitely does that. And it's really powerful because you all tell your stories. And what better way for people to connect than to hear your stories? And any athlete that reads it, whether you play football or not, you're going to see pieces of yourself as you guys talk about the difficulties and challenges, whether it was family issues or tragedies, or whether it's your transition out of sport. All of those are in the book. And so it's really, really powerful. So, Travis, there are going to be a lot of athletes listening, right? Some of which are going to be your age or older, the 30-plus club, who transition from sport. What's your advice on how to successfully transition from being a college athlete to professional athlete?
So, and I'll try to make this short and sweet so I don't take up too much time, but it's just really understanding your purpose, right? Having a greater purpose outside of that sport that drives you, right? And then that'll allow you to be able to align your activity and align, yourself with the circle of folks that can help you, down that path. For me, it's really always been about, being able to provide a better life for my family, for my kids, just based on my experiences, right? Yours may be, or whoever's listening, it may be, finding a cure for a disease or providing some resources or, a better situation for someone with disabilities or something like that, fighting hunger. I don't know what it is, right? But just identifying what are you truly passionate about, right? And then once you do that, hopefully you're in a position at a school where you can find some type of major or something like that can help you line up with that goal. And then, once you get done playing your sport, the best thing you can do is try to jump right in and start making a difference, right? Because once you're done playing, whether it's collegiately or, professionally, once you're done playing, you still have access, you still have attention, you still have, notoriety, I guess you can say, and people will give you a chance, people will listen to you, just because you played a sport. It's crazy how that works.
It is.
Right? And so the best advice I can give you, or part of the best advice I can give you is to start right away. Don't wait. Use that access while you still have it, right? But then two, you got to surround yourself with the right people. You got to surround yourself with the right people. People that believe in you. People that aren't just with you because you play the sport, right? People that truly care about where you end up, where you're going, and where you end up.
Yeah.
So that's huge because we're not always going to wake up and be on our best, be on our best foot and having our best day. So we'll need people to support us and keep us on the right path. So that's crucial.
Okay.
But just three.
Okay.
Is gotta underline it all, right? It's gotta be about something outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's a piece of what your passion is, but it's gotta be about something else. Going back for me, it's always been about my family, my kids, right? And so no matter what job I'll wake up and go to, no matter what title I have, it doesn't matter, what my degree was in. I know that I'm going to be successful because my ultimate drive comes from my family, right? Um, I love my job, don't get me wrong, but I don't wake up every day, come here with the mindset that I have and, the drive to deliver and make an impact like I have because I love being a packaging engineer and I love this company. It all stems from my love for my family, right? And so I know if I miss a beat here, then that's at the expense of them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so it has to be like your drive has to come from something else outside of just your success or outside of your money and all of those. I guess I don't want to call them shallow things because they are important.
Right.
But just has to have a little more substance behind it.
You make some really good points, Travis. One, it sounds like you're saying once you leave college athletics or professional athletics, you still need a team. Mm-hmm. You still need a team of people who are going to push you like your teammates did when you were on a sports team. And you need a coach who can help guide and mentor your professional success. I think it's pretty fascinating when I interview athletes and we talk about when they started playing, and oftentimes it's 5, 6, 7 years old. So you've had a coach from the time you were 5, 6, 7 until the time you finish playing sports, and then you leave the world of sports, and then you step out into the world without a coach.
Right.
And we think about the impact.
For disaster.
Exactly. And it took me a while to realize that one. It took me a while, but athletes who are out there listening, find yourself a professional coach. Find someone who can help guide your next path because it is going to be invaluable. One, for access to opportunities, but two, for you to be able to grow and have the type of life that you desire.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's huge. Travis, a lot of athletes I interview have a desire to help youth. I think when you grow up as an athlete, you go to camps. And when you're in college, you're forced to work the camps. And so camp or giving back or something community oriented kind of becomes a part of our responsibility as athletes.
Exactly.
But if someone wants to create an Apex Academy type organization, what would be some steps that you would give for them to do? And what are the best ways, what are some challenges you face with creating the organization that they could look out for?
Yeah. Piggybacking off of, the last piece of conversation we just had, find yourself a coach, a mentor, right? So find someone else that has gone down that path that can just talk to you about what to expect. Doesn't have to be that their mission is exactly the same as yours, but if someone's navigated the process of starting and establishing a nonprofit organization, all of that behind the scenes stuff is the same. It doesn't matter what you're setting out to do. So find yourself a coach through that process because it is very rigorous. It's very rigorous. But then I would just say, make sure you have a team in place that's ready and willing to help you get things off the ground and get things moving. You have to find people that are very passionate about doing what you guys are setting out to do because there's a lot of groundwork, a lot of footwork that needs to be done in order to get things going outside of the legal stuff and getting everything organized, right? So finding yourself a coach, right? Help you through the process. Then surrounding yourself with the right people in order to make or position you guys for success. And then too, just being genuine and being true about your mission. If there's something you set out to do and you have a very specific purpose, stick to it. For us in particular, right, there's a lot of ways that we could monetize our program, right? There's a lot of aspects in terms of what we're doing that could be a revenue generator, right? What we were very intentional and very clear to ourselves and amongst our board that we weren't going to turn into a program that just ended up being, a recruiting channel, right? Where we only accepted athletes because they were great athletes, and it ended up being a situation where college coaches were showing up to our programs and recruiting kids. We made it very specific and intentional that we weren't gonna end up like that because that wasn't our mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being true and being very focused on our mission and not that allowed us to not sway and just stay within scope of what we wanted to set out to do. So that's very key as well.
So being mission oriented and being clear about who you are and why
Exactly.
you're, and not letting anyone or anything deter that.
Exactly. So.
Travis, there's one thing that I really wanted to touch on that's important for athletes to know, and it's not talked about often at all, at least not in a positive light. And so before we go, will you talk a little bit about the intelligence that you have to be a college athlete? I know a lot of times we hear about dumb jocks or athletes don't care about learning. And sometimes athletes themselves play into that role, but it's not the reality. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what you had to know to be able to perform?
I chuckle when you think about. Are you there? Okay, yeah. When you think about the complexity of, and I'm gonna just use football as an example because that's my experience. When you think about the complexity of a playbook, whether it's offensive or defensive playbook, right? There's so many things that you have to understand as a player, not just scheme wise, but physical movements and positioning and things like that. Just um, understanding, patterns and trends and being able to read keys and things like that. So, like the intellect that it takes to be an athlete, to be a football player or athlete, and be successful at it is tremendous. So there's no way you can be dumb and play this game and be successful, right? The thing is, in that situation or in that moment, we choose, right, to put the energy in.
Mm-hmm.
We choose to put the focus in. We choose to put the time in to make sure we understand all of that stuff so that on game day we can perform, right?
Exactly.
Where some athletes fall short is they don't choose to put that same focus. They don't choose to put that same energy and passion into other areas of their lives, right? And so they fall short. But it has nothing to do with the mental capacity, right? It's all about where they're focusing and where they choose to put their energy, right? So there are some dumb athletes, and those dumb athletes are probably the guys that can't physically be on the court or be on the field and be successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to say every athlete is smart, but the ones that are out there performing and the ones that have the ability to perform at a high level, it's not possible to not have the intellectual, the mental capacity on the court, but you don't have it off the court. It's just not possible.
So athletes take that what we've learned on the court, transfer that off the court, use that to learn other things that will make you successful. We don't want to lose that part of who we are once we transition from sport because it's going to be invaluable for success in life. And this is coming from a packaging engineer who played at Michigan State, who walked on to the team. So TK, we definitely thank you for your wisdom. So if someone wants to learn more about Beyond the Gridiron, if they want to learn about Apex Academy, if they are a student athlete and want to know more about being a packaging engineer, how can they reach you?
All right. So on the packaging engineering front, you can just look me up on LinkedIn, and then we can connect on that front. Beyond the Gridiron, you can go to our website, www.beyondthegridironllc.com. And you can find out more about my story, about Ashton's story. You can also purchase a signed copy of the book there. If you want to find out more about Apex Academy, if you just want to find out, if you want to support us, if you want to partner with us, you can go to www.apex-academy.org. You can also follow me on Twitter at Travis Key.
Perfect. So you have multiple ways to get in touch with Travis, to learn more about Apex, to learn about Beyond the Gridiron, to learn about being a packaging engineer. Travis is one of the most authentic people that I've met, so I highly encourage you to reach out, talk to him, pick his brain, and he'll definitely share his wisdom and experience with you. Travis, as always, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes as Educators podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and listen in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to hear how current and former elite athletes are changing the game.